expect when you put your house on the market and the price people are willing to pay for it peaks after 12 days. That's when you'll get slightly more, they reckon, than the asking price. And they say, Simon, don't sell too quickly, that's the advice, and be prepared for a steady decline in what you'll get after 12 days. Is that reflected here at all in your experience?
Again, Jim, I think you've got to be really, really, really careful in analysing a piece of data and then having people behave responding to that data. Listen, I can give so many examples of house coming onto the market, somebody, maybe two people at the same time who have missed out, who are desperate to buy. I can give so many examples where the premium price was achieved within a few days because of circumstances like that. I can give you examples where property might have passed in at auction and sold 3 weeks later, and we've all been surprised by the fact that somebody very keen has come into the market, or again, if competition is obviously the big driver, where again, by circumstances, a couple of people come into the market at the same time, go for the property, and the premium is achieved a lot longer. I think it's really, really dangerous for buyers or sellers to try to modify their behaviour based on some
12-day rule.
Analytical data.
Okay.
Yeah.
It does run counter anyway to the wisdom that the first offer you get is the best one.
Well, I've got some...
That's a cliche, but why is it in the marketplace? Because the keen buyer who's missed out on two properties often throws everything at the next one that comes along, and they're the first because they're keen, they're looking for the next new property. When it arrives, they throw the kitchen sink at it.
Good to have your experience, Simon. Simon Damerel with us on the panel.
Well, I was just going to share, Judy, and my experience in all of this. We have never, ever bought a house with the intention of selling it, right? We have never done that. We've never bought a house with the intention of selling it. But we ended up buying and selling a lot of houses because we're gypsies. Well, actually, Judy isn't a gypsy.
You're just accidental capitalists.
No. Well, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so after a while, I get, itchy feet and I'd like to go somewhere else. And you suddenly find that the house that you bought for X, now you can sell for X plus 50,000 or whatever it might be. And so we have bought and sold a lot of houses, but never, ever with the intention of selling them. But if you're married to a gypsy like me, you might end up getting a few dollars in the bank.
Is that an offer to anyone in
No.
specific? Or
No.
I'm interested in your character and what's in your character, not that we've got time to discuss it, that makes you kind of get itchy feet after a certain time within a house.
I don't know. Maybe being an only child, maybe I didn't have a father to tell me what to do. I don't know. We could have a long psychology debate here to work that out.
Some people just need projects all the time.
I suppose that's
some
right.
people need projects. Or some people like houses and they go around looking at houses and, oh my God, they see one. They just have to have.
You're addicted to houses.
Indeed, exactly.
Dr. Brian Edwards, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And with you too, Michelle Bogue.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. We are back tomorrow at the usual time, and coming right up, Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, Bill English has set the date, September 23rd, as you know. We'll look at what it all means. After days of immigration chaos, the White House tries to set the record straight over entry to the United States, what it means for New Zealanders holding dual passports, and that new Supreme Court judge. We'll find out a bit more about him. Blood testing begins at 2 Auckland dental clinics for children who may have been exposed to contaminated water. Southland ratepayers furious over the cost of an unfinished cycleway. A Manawatu's school roll doubles in a single day. How did it cope? We'll ask all of its staff members at the same time. Bug sliders, Giles Beckford's going to eat one for us, we think, and much more coming up after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. This year's general election will be held on Saturday, September the 23rd. The Prime Minister made the announcement this afternoon, keeping up his predecessor John Key's tradition of announcing the date early in the year. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Bill English says National will be campaigning on its strong record as a government and New Zealand's strong economic performance. He says his preference for post-election partners is to remain working with ACT, the Māori Party and United Future, but he's not ruling out a deal with New Zealand First. Labour's leader Andrew Little says in response, bring it on. He says his party's ready and rearing to go so it can change the government and build a better New Zealand. Parliament will rise on August the 17th, after which political parties will hit the road as the election campaign begins in earnest. Atuiti whare pārimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The father of a 6-year-old who was treated at a school dental clinic at the centre of a health scare is furious that families were not alerted sooner. More than 2,000 children are being treated for HIV and hepatitis after being treated with contaminated equipment at Pukekohe Intermediate's dental clinic between September the 13th and January the 23rd. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
Hundreds of parents took their children to emergency clinics for testing today after it was revealed that a hose used to suck out saliva and blood from children's mouths was connected to one that blows in air. But Stuart Johnstone says he is taking his daughter to the family doctor for a blood test because he does not trust County's Manukau District Health Board. He is angry he heard about it first on social media. The DHB says it planned to start the hotline, open clinics, start calling parents and inform the media at 9 this morning, but was forced to change that when it was leaked to the media yesterday. Ko Sharon Brett-Kelly aho.
The chair of the Canterbury District Health Board has stepped down while he's investigated over his business dealings when he was a manager at the Earthquake Recovery Authority. Murray Cleverly and 2 other men who now work for the agency in charge of Christchurch's anchor projects are under scrutiny by the State Services Commission and the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. This follows accusations they used their positions as investment facilitators to arrange property deals through their own company for a finder's fee. Today, Mr Cleverly, who leads the Canterbury and South Canterbury DHBs, said he would step aside from the roles while the review took place. Otakaro Limited, which is in charge of the city's anchor projects, also announced 2 of its employees, understood to be Gerard Gallagher and Simon Nikoloff, have been stood down. Lawyers for the man who admitted sexually violating an elderly woman in her home before murdering her say he fears for his safety inside prison if the full details of his offending are disclosed. Jaden Lee Strubant admitted 2 charges of sexual violation and murdering 69-year-old Sean Shu Tian shortly before his trial in the High Court in Auckland was due to begin. Edward Gay reports.
Aspects of the 19-year-old's offending remain suppressed, and he's being held in segregation for his own safety. His lawyers say they'll need a psychologist's report before a full argument is heard at his sentencing next month, when the Crown will be seeking a sentence of preventive detention. According to the summary of facts, Strubant was a neighbour of Miss Chian. He grabbed her, struck her in the head and stomped on her while she was on the ground. He then sexually violated her twice before going through her house and stealing an iPad and a gold watch. Ko Edward Gay aho.
A German tourist rescued today after being lost on Mount Taranaki for 3 days built makeshift huts to shelter under at night. Teresa Schaaf from Darmstadt near Frankfurt was found a little after 11 by a Department of Conservation worker who was out counting fio or duck. The 19-year-old says she decorated the huts to make them easier for rescuers to see.
I built a little shelter out of sticks and fern, and I put tissues around my shelters so people could see them. It was pretty cold.
Teresa Schaaf says she sustained herself on a packet of Skittles and a bottle of water, but was starting to become lightheaded because she hadn't eaten. She says with rain closing in on the mountain today, she was becoming worried about her safety. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. Sport now. There's relief among the Australian bowling lineup that they won't have to contend with Martin Guptill in tomorrow's second one-day cricket international between New Zealand and Australia in Napier. After a lean series against Bangladesh, Guptill made 61 in the narrow win in Auckland on Monday, but has been ruled out of the Napier game with a hamstring injury. The Australian skipper and wicket-keeper Matthew Wade, who missed the first match with a back injury and will also miss tomorrow's match, concedes Guptill's absence is a relief as he scored plenty of runs against them recently.
Certainly handy to not have him in the lineup. He's a class player. He tends to get going a lot against us. So when he comes back for the third game, we've got to find a way to get him out. But it's obviously handy to not have him in the team at this stage.
Matthew Wade, the Black Caps lead the best-of-3 match series 1-0. The Warriors playmaker Shaun Johnson will tone down his participation in this weekend's Auckland Nines competition in the hope of securing a more important prize, the National Rugby League title. Johnson's been an ever-present fixture at the Nines tournament since it began in 2014 and guided the Warriors to last year's final. But he says he'll be taking more of a backseat role this weekend as he focuses on pushing the side to NRL success in 2017. And the former British marathon great Ron Hill has been forced to end his amazing streak of running every day for more than 52 years after the 78-year-old suffered chest pains and decided not to risk it. Hill, the 1970 Commonwealth Games marathon gold medalist, began the streak on December 20th, 1964, running at least a mile every day for 52 years and 39 days. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dan Salmon on the tuna industry. It stinks. Jazz aficionado Nick Tipping celebrates Ronnie Scott's 90th birthday, while Shobha Narayan's on the line from India, where the government is getting rid of 501,000 rupee notes. And there's protest over plans to ban a bull taming festival. I'm not sure the protesters consulted any of the bulls. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from Met Service. At midnight tomorrow, Thursday, Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. It'll be a mix of fine and cloudy periods. Light rain from Auckland southwards from tomorrow evening. Waitomo through to Wellington, that includes central high country, also Waited Upper. Occasional rain developing today, rain becoming persistent and heavy tomorrow. Northwesterly gales about Wellington and Waited Upper today and many other places late tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain developing in Hawke's Bay today, Gisborne late tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Scattered rain clearing this evening, but returning tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, drizzle patches, they should clear up this evening. Mainly fine day there tomorrow. Westland, fine or becoming fine today. Rain returns tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, fine around central Otago, but showers elsewhere at times. Possible thunderstorms about eastern Otago today. Fiordland, showers today. Rain tomorrow evening. Thunderstorms. And for the Chathams, a period of rain tonight and again tomorrow evening. Just after 8.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50, and of course the RNZ website, plus, as we have been since the beginning of time, I suspect, the radio too. Let's begin in the future, September. Yes, the Prime Minister's announcement that the country will go to the polls on Saturday, September the 23rd. When asked to pick a word to sum up the election, it was growth. Bill English launched what will effectively be a 33-week-long election campaign this afternoon. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell, was there.
Bill English glided into the Beehive Theatrette at 2 minutes after 2 o'clock this afternoon with a wry smile on his face. Reporters were poised, social media pages open, fingers hovering over their phones, mostly with September the 23rd pre-written as the election date. Political parties like to avoid a winter election campaign and prefer not to have polling day on any weekend there's an All Black game. Add in school holidays and long weekends, and it hasn't been too hard to predict what the date will be. Bill English says he's announced the election date early as it's important to provide the country with certainty.
Not to use the election date as a political tool, and that it's in everyone's best interest to have plenty of notice.
Mr English says National will be campaigning on its strong record as a government and New Zealand's strong economic performance.
We'll go into the election with a positive and ambitious program which will back all New Zealanders to succeed. We're well placed compared to other countries, and that is down to the hard work of our households and businesses across the country, backed by the National-led government's clear and successful plan for our future.
Bill English says his preference for post-election partners is to remain working with ACT, the Māori Party and United Future. But of course, depending on how the votes fall, if needs must, National will look elsewhere. And Mr English says while it's unlikely, he's not ruling out a deal with New Zealand First.
The reason it's unlikely is because we're a party who believes in an open New Zealand, outward-looking, open to investment, immigration and New Zealand First are an inward-looking party who believe in a closed-up New Zealand. So there's big differences. But as I've said, depending on the makeup of Parliament, we may be in the position where we would be negotiating with New Zealand First.
Labour's leader Andrew Little says bring it on. He says his party's ready and rearing to go so it can change the government and build a better New Zealand.
The National Government has run out of ideas. They've got nothing new to say to New Zealanders. We've got major challenges. We have the lowest level of home ownership in 60 years. We're going to build more homes, get more people owning their own homes. They're letting the school system down, they're letting the police down. We want safer communities, we want schools that are going to prepare our kids for the future. That's what I'm campaigning on.
Parliament will rise on August the 17th, after which political parties will hit the road as the election campaign begins in earnest. Atu i te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
Thanks, Chris, and we'll have more on the political year ahead later in the program. Parents are furious that they weren't contacted sooner about a contamination scare at an Auckland school dental clinic. About 2,500 children are being tested for HIV and hepatitis after they were treated with contaminated equipment at Pukekohe Intermediate's dental clinic between September 13 last year and January 23rd. Sharon Brett Kelly reports.
Hundreds of parents have been taking their children to emergency clinics for testing today after it was revealed that a hose used to suck out saliva and blood from children's mouths was connected to one that blows in air. But Stuart Johnstone says he's taking his 6-year-old to the family GP for a blood test because he doesn't trust the DHB. He's angry he wasn't personally contacted about the contamination scare. Instead, he saw it on a news feed on Facebook.
We're really annoyed about that, given that they've known about it since the 23rd of January, and still no one's had the decency to phone us.
What is your biggest concern, Stuart?
Obviously, that our beautiful young 6-year-old that has so much potential has been exposed to a deadly disease.
Stuart Johnstone says he'll take his daughter to a private dentist to have her filling fixed and send the bill to the DHB. He says parents deserved better.
It's not hard to get a group of people together to start ringing some of these parents and actually just talk to us. Let us know what's going on. Give us the correct information.
Many parents who had their children tested today were too anxious to speak, but those who did say they heard about the scare on the news or social media last night.
My reaction was, oh dear, what's this?
And are you concerned at all?
Yeah, a little bit, because she's special needs as well, so yeah, even getting the blood test is going to be a bit of an issue with her, so yeah.
A little bit of concern, and then I just went and started researching as much as I could rather than panic.
Infectious diseases specialist Dr. Tim Blackmore says the risk of a child catching anything worse than a cold from the equipment is negligible.
If a child received treatment after another child, they could have got a cold or something like that from the previous child. But for the scary viruses that have been mentioned, like HIV, Hep B and Hep C, the risks from those are extremely low.
Dr. Blackmore says children who were treated later in the risk period should not rush to be tested.
Somebody had dental work a couple of weeks ago, then I personally would advise them to wait because the chances of them getting anything are close to non-existent, and they'll get better reassurance with a later test.
The DHB's Chief Medical Officer Gloria Johnson says the DHB did not want parents to find out by social media. It had planned to open the hotline, open clinics, start calling parents and to make a statement to the media simultaneously at 9 this morning, but it was forced to change that at the last minute.
We're obviously dismayed about that as well. We don't want people to be finding out these things by social media. Our hand was forced last night because there was some kind of leak from someone to some media outlets late yesterday afternoon. And then, of course, we had media insisting that they wanted to speak to us last night.
Gloria Johnson says all parents will be contacted within 7 days, but people can call the hotline and speak to someone urgently if they need to. She says the first test results will come back tomorrow. Meanwhile, DHBs around the country are being urged to check their dental equipment. All other clinics in Auckland have been cleared. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Sharon Brett Kelly ahau.
Let's go to Washington now, where, as protesters gathered outside the White House again, President Trump moved to restore the Supreme Court's conservative majority by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch to a lifetime position on the bench of the nation's highest court. The 49-year-old is a federal appeal court judge from Colorado who's worked in the Justice Department under President George W. Bush. He's a long Conservative record like the justice he's replacing. He's also the youngest nominee in more than a quarter of a century. Inevitably, he will help shape rulings on issues such as abortion, gun control, the death penalty, which is still used in some states, and religious freedoms and rights. This report from Sarah Corker.
There was a hint of reality TV drama. President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court revealed during a prime-time televised address.
Today I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch.
Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. President Trump's choice, a staunch Conservative judge, to help shape the court for years to come on issues like gun control and religious rights.
Judge Gorsuch has outstanding legal skills, a brilliant mind, tremendous discipline, and has earned bipartisan support.
So what do we know about Judge Neil Gorsuch? He's 49 and lives in Denver, Colorado. A graduate of Columbia University and Harvard Law School. He served on the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeal since 2006 and used to work in George W. Bush's Justice Department. He is most noted for his strong defense of religious freedom.
The Supreme Court's work is vital not just to a region of the country, but to the whole. Vital to the protection of the people's liberties under law and to the continuity of our Constitution, the greatest charter of human liberty the world has ever known.
The US Supreme Court is hugely influential, the nation's highest court. Decisions it's made include legalising abortion, legalising gay marriage, and ending school segregation in the civil rights era. The ninth seat is sat empty since the death of Conservative Justice Antonin Scalia nearly a year ago. His replacement, Judge Gorsuch, is described as straight-talking by those who've worked with him.
He says what he means and he means what he says, and he comes down typically on the conservative side of the agenda.
The president's choice must now be approved by the Senate, and given the huge impact the Supreme Court has on American society, Judge Gorsuch is likely to face tough questions.
Potentially even a filibuster too. That was BBC's Sarah Corker. If Judge Gorsuch's nomination is approved, the balance of the court will be 5 Conservatives to 4 Liberals. It really is a fascinating business. The power the Supreme Court has in the United States. We'll have more on that later too. Before President Trump unveiled his Supreme Court nominee, Washington was still digesting the fallout from the troubled rollout of the president's immigration orders, that executive order. Republican officials conceded that the implementation of the president's plan was, quote, regrettable. We'll have more on that later. And the legal challenges from state governments are mounting. At the White House, top administration officials started arguing that it's wrong even to call the president's restrictions a travel ban. Here's the ABC's Washington correspondent, Connor Duffy.
Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly is a retired 4-star Marine general experiencing a baptism of fire in his new role. Since President Donald Trump's executive order, he's faced a storm of protest around the world with accusations it demonises Muslims.
This is not, I repeat, not a ban on Muslims. The Homeland Security mission is to safeguard the American people, our homeland, our values, and religious liberty is one of our most fundamental and treasured values.
Under the order, refugees are banned for 4 months, Syrian refugees banned indefinitely, and travellers from 7 majority Muslim nations kept out too.
By preventing terrorists from entering our country, we can stop terror attacks from striking the homeland. We cannot gamble with American lives.
The 7 countries are Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Libya and Somalia. The administration describes the order as a temporary restriction rather than a ban, so it can impose extreme vetting on people from those countries seeking to enter the states. Secretary Kelly explained why those particular countries were chosen.
The countries, there are many countries, 7 that we're dealing with right now, that have, in our view, in my view, don't have the kind of law enforcement, records keeping, that kind of thing that can convince us that one of their citizens is indeed who that citizen says they are and what their background might be.
Opposition to the executive order continues to grow both around the world and within the United States. Today, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey announced the state was filing a lawsuit in federal court challenging the travel ban on constitutional grounds.
The executive order is harmful, discriminatory, and unconstitutional. It discriminates on the basis of religion and national origin, denies our residents access to due process and equal protection of the law, and violates federal immigration law.
The city of San Francisco also lodged a challenge today. It's one of several legal challenges mounting around the country to a president who is no stranger to litigation.
There's more confusion and condemnation about what an immigration restriction on the 7 nationalities means for New Zealanders with dual nationalities with those countries. Every time people think it's clarified, it seems to become confused again. The Prime Minister says he will put New Zealand's position on the immigration policy to US President Donald Trump the first time they speak over the phone. Jacob McSweeney reports.
The US Embassy in Wellington says dual citizens of New Zealand and Yemen, Libya and Somalia may still travel to America, where they will be given a visa on arrival. However, if they have travelled to any of those countries since March 2011, as well as Iraq, Iran, Syria and Sudan, they must now apply for a visa before travelling. The embassy says those of dual nationality from New Zealand and Iraq, Iran, Syria and Sudan were not eligible for the visa waiver program before the executive order, and they must still apply for a visa. But a lot of Muslim New Zealanders are confused and stressed about what the complicated policy means for those wanting to travel to the US. The president of the Federation of Islamic Associations in New Zealand, Hazem Arafat, says figuring out what the policy means for his members is a headache.
You have to have a PhD in international law before you apply to a visa to go to the States. It's very confusing. It's very disturbing. We still think that it's a discriminatory policy. It's just really tarnishing the image of the United States, as a beacon of liberty, as a beacon of freedom.
He is happy with the Prime Minister voicing disagreement with the policy, but he thinks Mr English could have been stronger.
There is no doubt that this policy will add a lot of stress to people's lives. We still fully believe that it's linking Islam and Muslims with terrorism, and the whole Muslim world have said since day one till now that terrorism has got no religion. We fully believe that it's unfair on us to be treated this way by the American president.
Bill English says as far as he's concerned, the policy is clear for New Zealand citizens with dual nationality.
The US administration has been having to work pretty hard to clarify the policy themselves. They will have been dealing with inquiries from probably every country in the world. It's taken a while, but now the position's clear, and I'm pleased that New Zealanders who are dual citizens are not caught up in this policy. We disagree with the policy. They shouldn't be caught up in it.
Bill English says New Zealand can still maintain a good relationship with the US, even if he voices his disagreement with President Trump's policy.
That doesn't change the need for, as a small country, a positive relationship with the US. And I think you can do that at the same time as disagreeing with some of the policies. I don't see why it should affect the fundamental relationship.
Meanwhile, the Refugee Council of New Zealand is adamant the Trump administration is breaking international law and flouting its responsibilities to the Refugee Convention. Its Vice President Colin Henry says there needs to be more condemnation not just from the Prime Minister but also the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Immigration.
We urge the Prime Minister and other ministers of government to express New Zealand's distance, in fact, condemnation of that type of world politics, which appears to be singling out persons on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, and other such prescribed grounds.
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Murray McCully, has repeatedly declined RNZ's requests for an interview about this. For Checkpoint, ko Jacob McSweeney, Tene.
Yes, Murray McCully been giving his ministry a bit of a serve. We would love to talk to the minister about this. The government has released documents it says supports its decision to use exceptional circumstances discretion to grant citizenship to Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. This is just breaking news. This has just happened. Our gallery is going through the documents as we speak, and we will talk to them about what they have found in them. So the government has just released documents. It says supports its decision to use exceptional circumstances discretion to grant citizenship to Peter Thiel. More on that coming up. The time is 5:24. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Fairly frantic start to the program today, so we're going to change pace a little bit and location too by travelling to a tiny country school not too far outside of Palmerston North. Linton Country School, which has received a bit of media attention of late for having only one pupil, but a community that's determined to save it. Linton Country School is 128 years old. Its only pupil is 6. He's back from holidays, so today, during lunch break, we phoned them.
Good afternoon, Linton Country School. Gail speaking.
Hi Gail, John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. How are you?
John.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a very busy day today.
Well, I'm not surprised. Let's go through your jobs. Are you the principal?
Yes.
Are you the teacher?
Yes.
Are you the office person?
Yes.
What else are you?
The caretaker, the nurse.
It's and Cruz's classmate too, I suspect. You'd be his buddy, wouldn't you?
As well.
Yeah. How's he going? Is he a demanding pupil?
No, just hold on a second, John.
Okay.
Oh.
I think Gail, who is the principal and the teacher of Cruz, the one pupil at Linton Country School, might be dealing with her charge at the moment.
Sorry about that, John.
That's all right. Were you dealing with Cruz?
Well, it's funny, but the role has doubled.
Good God!
Yeah. So I was actually dealing with Cruz and Inika.
Inika, so you've got a new one?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful news.
Inika. Yeah.
I've never ever spoken to anyone whose school role has doubled in a day.
I've never been in a school where the role's doubled in one day.
So let's talk about Linton Country School, because it did have a bigger role, didn't it? I think, what was it? Was it the lofty heights of double figures, wasn't it, last year?
Yes, it was. Well, I've only been here since the beginning of last term.
Yeah.
And yes, there were 12 students last term.
And some of them went off to big school, right?
Yeah, well, some of them have gone to high school,
Yeah.
some have gone to intermediate, yeah. Yeah, and some have gone to other schools.
Yeah, which is a bummer, isn't it?
Well, you see, it was a little bit difficult last term because the principal was really sick. And that's why I was brought in as part of the emergency staffing scheme, because he was away on sick leave. And because the board knew that the role was about to drop with children going to, higher learning, the Board of Trustees was really concerned about the future viability of the school. So they had a conversation with the Ministry of Education. When I arrived in October, I think the first week I was here, they had a community consultation meeting, because the ministry said, we don't close schools, you need to talk to your community, and it's up to the community whether or not the school is viable or not.
And the community said, actually, we want the school,
They did, yeah. They actually had 3 consultation meetings last year, and the community were absolutely adamant that they want the school to continue. It's been here for 127, 128 years.
Yes, and I was just reading that I think Cruz is the 6th generation Strickett to attend.
That's right. Well, not necessarily Strickett, but certainly.
Sorry, a 6th generation in his family.
That's right.
And the wonderful thing about all of this is that the community are putting their money where their mouths are, right?
That's right.
So they are financially backing you in order to keep you open, and also the local preschool.
Well, there's actually not a local preschool, but there's one. Some preschool children and their mums have started a weekend group at school.
And how many in that?
Well, the one day that I came out, there were 7 or 8 of them.
Biblical. That's just huge,
yeah,
isn't it?
I know. So, but there are other preschoolers.
So
there
when
are
they
other preschoolers in the area, and that's why, the community is saying, hey, we don't want to lose this because we want to use it in the future. It will grow again. And as I said, with the principal, I don't know what reasons there were. I mean, apparently the school was bigger, earlier, a couple of years ago, and it's just sort of slowly declined. So when I came with the 12 children, it was because the principal was on sick leave. Yeah. When his sick leave ran out and he still wasn't well enough to come back to school, he resigned. So that's why they've asked me to come back for another term while they're recruiting a principal.
And in the meantime, I mean, look at the impact of you, Gail.
Yeah, look what I've done.
I mean, write that on your CV. There's been a 100% role increase under your tenure. And where did the new one come from, the new arrival?
She's reasonably local, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Mum, her dad actually phoned me on Monday, and then on Tuesday her mum came down with her.
Magic. So you've got enough community support and enough youngsters coming through, turning 5 in the next year or two.
Well, yeah, in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Anyway. I would say probably in 3 years' time the school will be back up and running as a long-term viable school.
If the community continues to stand by it.
Absolutely.
And they have every intention of doing so. Are you going to stay on?
No, I'm part of the emergency staffing scheme, which the School Trustees Association runs. So
yeah, absolutely.
I just go into schools that need somebody for a term. I actually live in the Eastern Bay of Plenty.
Bloody hell! So how do you get to school? How do you get
quite a commute.
So you don't drive every day, do you?
No, of course not. It's a 6-hour drive. No, I'm actually staying in Palmerston North at Massey University in the halls of residence.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm being put up there, and I just drive out. It's only a 10-minute drive from the halls out to here.
And you go home on the weekends?
Yeah, not every weekend, no, but I will do this weekend because it's a long one. But yeah, about once a month I go home.
Right. Just before you go, what do you? It's lunch break now. Is it? Did you ring the bell? Do you ring a bell?
I do at the end of lunch break, not at the beginning.
Right. And so what are they doing? The two of them?
Well, they're sitting outside eating their lunch at the moment and watching. I just heard the great crash of the tree that some workmen are taking down in the paddock behind the school. So I just heard them take off out to the fence to have a look at that.
Country life, it sounds marvellous to me. Thanks, Gail.
Yeah.
It's so lovely to talk to you.
That's quite all right. Thanks, John.
It was Gail Dobbin, who was the principal, the secretary, the teacher, the everything at Linton Country School. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Lots to fit in between now and 6, so let's go straight to the headlines with Paul Brennan in Wellington.
Thank you, John. The Prime Minister has announced this year's general election will be held on Saturday, September the 23rd. Bill English named the date this afternoon, keeping up his predecessor's John Key's tradition of announcing the date early in the year. The father of a child treated at a school dental clinic at the centre of a health scare is furious at the delay in alerting families. More than 2,000 children were treated with contaminated equipment at Pukekohe Intermediate's dental clinic between September the 13th and January the 23rd. They're now being tested for HIV and hepatitis. Stuart Johnston is angry he first heard about it on social media and says he's taking his daughter to the family doctor for a blood test because he doesn't trust County's Manukau District Health Board. The chair of 2 Canterbury District Health Boards has stepped down while being investigated over his business dealings while he was a manager at the Earthquake Recovery Authority. Murray Cleverly, along with Jared Gallagher and Simon Nikoloff, are accused of using their positions at CERA to arrange property deals through their own company for a finder's fee. Mr Gallagher and Mr Nikoloff are also understood to have been stood down by their current employer, Otakaro Limited, which manages Christchurch City's anchor projects. Lawyers for a man who sexually violated an elderly woman in her home before murdering her say he fears for his safety inside prison if the full details of his offending are disclosed. Jaden Lee Strubant, who's 19, admitted 2 charges of sexual violation and murdering 69-year-old Sean Shu Chian today in the High Court in Auckland. Aspects of the offending remain suppressed and Strubant is being held in segregation for his own safety. And the economy is continuing to generate strong job growth despite a rise in the number of people out of work. Unemployment grew to 5.2% in the 3 months to December due to the number of people entering the workforce exceeding the 19,000 jobs created. The chief economist for the ANZ Bank, Cameron Bagri, expects demand for workers will remain strong this year and unemployment should start falling. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update will be at 6.
Thanks very much, Paul. Between now and then, lots coming up. The government has released documents. It says support its decision to use exceptional circumstances, discretion to grant citizenship to Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. Benedict Collins is just going through them at high speed. We will talk to Benedict shortly. A Southern Response policyholder settlement offer increases by $1 million. They are fighting this out in the High Court. In fact, it's going to the Appeal Court now. We'll have more on that. Southern ratepayers are furious. The budget for an unfinished cycleway has blown out by nearly $10 million. And a Paeroa pensioner wanted to change her bank account details to have her superannuation paid into. She went to the WINS office to give them her new details. Easy, right? Well, no. And in the process of understanding that no and insight into what it might be like to deal with WINS regularly. Alexis tells us all about it. Lots of people contacting us from Christchurch after that interview with Gail at Linton Country School. What a delight Gail was, the principal and everything there. And Gail was told by the Ministry of Education that they don't close schools, what people are saying, and this is an email from Beth. Tell that to the people of Christchurch, especially Phillipstown, what a travesty that was, and Redcliffs, who have had to fight and fight for that school. Thank you for all your feedback. It's 25 minutes to 6. Let's go to Giles Beckford, our business editor in Wellington. Hi, Giles. Unemployment numbers out. Oh, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you.
Good. Unemployment numbers out, job numbers, what are they telling us?
Well, a little bit, as we were hearing just that last item in the news headlines, unemployment ticked up to 5.2%. And while you might think that that's a bad sign, actually, it's one of those statistical things that occurs about the way Statistics New Zealand gather these numbers and crunches them. But the reality is that the size of the workforce of people available to work grew at a quicker rate than the economy was able to create jobs. But when you look at it, last year we created 138,000 jobs. Now, you know, that's massive number in some really key sectors such as construction, services sectors that are related to tourism, retail and the like, and also the ancillary services such as architects and designers and all those sort of things. They're booming and doing really well. So we're showing that an economy that's growing around 3.5% is generating a solid number of jobs. The size of the workforce will tend to go up and down. It will reflect the level of immigration that we have. 70,000 people in 2016 settled here. That's bound to boost the size of the workforce. So we will expect, shouldn't be too surprised to see the jobless rate rise. But in all likelihood, it will dip below 5%. At the moment, we're humming along. But what it does show is some dislocation between what were the jobs we are creating and the jobs that we actually need, that companies need. And one of the biggest complaints that we hear is that firms have trouble finding the right people with the right skills to fill their positions. And that's probably a broader issue that we need to sit down as a country with policymakers and smart people and ordinary folk on the street and say, how do we actually address a really basic issue such as that? Because those are the sort of keys to the future, the next 10, 15, 20 years in this country, with all the dislocation that's happening with technology and the like, that we actually need to start thinking at really very seriously.
I suspect another issue people want to talk about is relatively low wages and very low wage growth. Are there numbers around that, Giles?
The numbers that came out today showed, this is from the Labour Cost Index. Now, depending on which side of the fence you're on, whether you're a politician, you're a worker, a unionist, you're in a company, you can take whatever labour cost measure you want. But we use the Labour Cost Index. It just gives you a broad measure of wages. They grew 1.6% for the private sector without overtime last year, and with a strong pool of labour, lots of people chasing jobs, of course, except in some key areas where the employer will have to pay over the odds to attract people, then we can expect that wage growth is going to be quite slow. But the other side of that is that it doesn't boost inflation. It will keep the Reserve Bank relatively happy. We expect that they should sit on the sidelines for the rest of the year, leaving their cash rate unchanged.
Right, thanks, Charles. What do the markets do today?
Once again, a bit of a negative day for the top 50 index shares, down 19,732. The New Zealand dollar's fallen about 0.75 cents today. Those, the employment numbers in the end, because they reduce the likelihood of any change in interest rates from the Reserve Bank, it takes that little bit of, should we say, puffery speculation out of the currency. So it fell to 72.6 euro cents and 96.1 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor, thank you so much. But Giles, you poor bugger, before you go...
But wait, there's more.
We read a little story this afternoon about the Bug Lab Science Exhibition at Te Papa there in Wellington. Until the end of the exhibition, the cafe there is serving a dish to complement the exhibition. And Giles, you've got it. The dear old people at Te Papa have delivered it to you. It's a bug slider. Have you got it there?
They said, with love from Te Papa on a big envelope for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, are you ready? This is it.
Okay.
There it is.
Well, so, Giles, can you describe it for people who are listening? What's that thing on the top?
What we have here is we have a little bun. I know everybody is a tosser and they call them a slider, but it's a little bun.
Yeah.
Right? And on the top of it is a locust, but it could be a cicada, possibly a grasshopper, or it's a pretty emaciated grasshopper, I have to say, poor sod. Inside is a rather flattened cicada or locust as well. The little patty is made of minced up locusts with chicken meat, and then there's some really nice tomato and a rather limp browny bit of lettuce, right? And these are kumara chips. I have to say that they're not quite the golden brown. It does worry me with the old acrylamide content there. And then we have, just to cap it all off, some ant aioli. Now these are made from lime ants. They apparently give a slightly lemongrass diffusion, and I would probably suggest you might like a little chilled hock or Pinot Gris to go with this. If you want a bit more fire in your aioli, then you'd use the Argentinian ant, of course. That will come and give you a decent bite. Now, I've bonded a wee bit. This one I call Jeremy. Jeremy's looking in much better shape, I have to say, than Quentin. Who's like,
he's flattened in the middle of it.
Poor sod, but somebody's got to go. My question is, an animal rights activist and safe food people may ask, first catch your locust, right? Are they caught and killed in a humane?
And dispatched humanely. I think that's a very important question. And we'll go back.
That worries me.
And we're not going to ask you to eat it, Giles, because it was delivered a couple of hours ago. But if it was piping hot, would you have eaten it?
If it was piping hot, I would have said they were great-looking chips. I would have gone like this with the aioli, and that's pleasant. That's just perhaps a bit too mayonnaisey, touch too much vinegar in there, but yeah, pleasant same. I'd have to say I'm not sure about it. It looks nice, but as somebody said to me, would you eat something that would possibly come around and eat you? But I suppose since we're going to be facing plagues of locusts in the future,
we're going to have to start eating them.
We may be faced on that. Yeah, I think there's an opening here for an enterprising New Zealand business.
Thanks, Giles. We really appreciate it. Giles with the bug slider. If you have eaten one at Te Papa and want to describe the experience to us, we'd love to hear from you. Let's go to Christchurch. Southern Response to appeal a High Court decision allowing a class action by 36 of its customers to proceed. Now, late last year, the High Court found the Southern Response policyholders had proven sufficient commonality as a group to take this class action rather than separate or individual claims. What's being alleged is that Southern Response engaged in a deliberate strategy designed to deceive policyholders and delay claims with a view to reducing its financial liability. Once again, Southern Response declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint, but in a statement said the class action would only delay the settlement of individual claims. It also said the group has no evidence to support their case and the class action should not have been allowed to proceed. So that's what Southern Response says in writing. The group's lawyer, Grant Cameron, disagrees. He says one of his clients settled with Southern Response for $1 million more than she was first offered, and the government-owned insurer is using stalling tactics.
Yeah, I think they're trying to create the public image that the class action is going to be a long, painful affair. They entirely control the speed at which this goes ahead. If the insurer wanted to do the right thing, it could settle the claims probably within a very short period of time. It could all be over literally within a month. On the other hand, dragging it out through the courts will both perhaps erode the class action in some fashion, they hope. I think that's very unlikely, but more particularly they might try and deter other people from joining.
Okay, I want to come in there because now Southern Response won't talk to us. In fact, they never give us interviews. But I have a media release from them, 30 January, 2:30 p.m, from Linda Falwasser, who is the head of strategic communications there.
That's right.
And it's a very, very pointed document indeed. In fact, I haven't seen many documents like it. She says Southern Response holds serious concerns about the impact of the funding arrangements for the class action on individual customers.
Why would the insurer retain those sorts of concerns when it should be concerned to pay out to people the many hundreds of thousands of dollars that most of them are owed above and beyond what Southern Response has already suggested to them.
Grant, this remarkable statement, which is from Southern Response, written by Linda Fellwasser, we'll put it online so that our listeners and viewers can read it, says Southern Response holds serious concerns about the impact of the funding arrangements for the class action on individual customers. Now, that seems to me to possibly suggest that you might be ripping people off. Is that your take on this?
I think that is an implication. It's designed to deter other people from coming forward, because the court has now said that if other policyholders now want to join this action because it is proceeding, then there is an opt-in order in place. They've got until the 16th of April to join the action, and so the insurer is extremely worried that a lot of people are now going to come forward and join.
Okay, so you're talking about opting in. She says they're opting out. I'll read the relevant paragraph from this media release. The original representative for the group has now settled with Southern Response and has withdrawn from the action. An additional 10 other group members have also settled their claims with Southern Response and have withdrawn from the action or are in the process of doing so. Is that correct?
No, that's untrue. There are about another 5 people who have settled, and of course the very, very nature of the class action is to apply pressure to the insurer to do the right thing.
Right, so what you're saying, and this is really important, is that by being part of the class action, you are effectively placing extra pressure on Southern Response to settle, and the settlement is therefore a result of being a participant in the class action.
Exactly right. That instead of sitting there waiting for 5 or 6 years with nothing happening, talking to your insurer, by joining the class action, there is now very real and direct litigation pressure. The insurer does not want to go to court with this terrible bloody track record of not performing on its claims management, and so therefore is choosing to settle these things.
But she says quite explicitly that the settlement is evidence of the fact that people are deserting the class action.
That's absolute nonsense. All that's happening is that people are settling their entitlements, and they're doing it on grounds that we can recommend because they are full and fair settlement.
Right, so this is perverse, isn't it? Because you're saying that as a result of being in the class action, Southern Response are more likely to settle with you.
That's right.
She's saying, hey, you don't have to be in the class action because we're settling.
Yeah, well, people outside the class action are certainly settling because without the ability to litigate, they certainly can't prize their entitlements. So they're getting settled for considerable undervalue in most cases. If they're in the class action, nobody's getting settled for undervalue. When the claim is ready to be resolved, the insurer either chooses to pay up or sits there until such time as the court directs what will happen.
So you're saying that people do better and are getting more and are prepared to settle because they regard the offer as fair as a direct result of being in the class action?
Exactly. I think Maria DeVries' case is a perfect example.
Can you elaborate around that?
Yes, absolutely. Maria's case gives the point very clearly. The insurer said that she was entitled to about $277,000 from memory, and it was a repair. It was subsequently shown that the house needed to be rebuilt, and independent experts established that and estimated the cost of rebuild at $1.65 million. So that was the value of her claim, yet the insurer was nearly $1.5 million short of that figure. Now, she ultimately settled for a figure that Southern Response has released into the media for about $1.25 million. So she went up by $1 million, and even then that figure was short of the true value, only because she was insured for about 2/3 of the area of her house.
So she went up by $1 million as a result, you're saying, of being in the class action?
That's right.
Okay, how much did being in the class action cost her?
From memory, about $140,000. I'd have to check the figures, John. But
so Linda Fellwasser and Southern Response would say, hey, Grant Cameron's clipping the ticket big time. You would say, but actually, as a result of being in the class action, she's $1 million better off.
Of that, yeah, absolutely, and she would say that publicly and has said so, and she's, I think, publicly stated she thought the costs were extremely good value. And of that, of the fees, 3/4 of that, 75%, went to the funder because it's funded and underwritten the action, and 25% came to the lawyers.
Have you seen the statement from Linda Fellwasser from Southern Response?
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I think it is a repetition of their theory of this whole affair, that it's really a form of insurer propaganda to try and say, look, we're doing the right thing, this is wonderful, these people are outside the pale, come to us or take some independent advice, and you really can do a good deal with us. Whereas we're saying that is nonsense, you are being misled, you certainly need to get advice from this quarter as well.
This is still pistols at dawn stuff, and once again, we would really like Southern Response to talk to us. And Linda Feldwasser, you're capable of issuing a really pointed media release. We believe you're capable, therefore, of giving an interview to Radio New Zealand. But I am struck by the fact that you guys are still facing off, slagging each other off, pointedly in dispute, and it is 6 years on.
Exactly right. The key issue is that most of the expert advice and information can be assembled within about a 3-month period, and claims at that point can be settled. So we've had 6 years. Why is it the insurer has to repeat work time and time and time again? We say it's because of a systematic strategy designed to minimise policy holders' payments.
Are other people joining? Other Southern Response?
We have had a lot of inquiries as a result of this announcement by Southern Response.
Grant Cameron talking to us this afternoon. We know we keep making this point, but it's important. Southern Response keep declining our invitation to be interviewed. If you are part of that class action or were part of it, we would love to hear from you about your experience of it. It's 10 to 6. Breaking news. This is our story about the citizenship granted to billionaire Peter Thiel, the discretionary citizenship. The Department of Internal Affairs has released quite a large number of documents, I think, this afternoon. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has them and has been going through them at high speed. Benedict, hi, are you there?
Yeah, good evening, John.
Hi, good evening. Nice to talk to you. I'm always slightly suspicious when documents drop late in the afternoon because it doesn't give the evening news programs time to really digest them. What have you found so far?
Yeah, hey, and just on that, just to let listeners and viewers know, so about 145 pages of information have just been released not long ago, maybe half an hour ago. I'm about 30 pages through at the moment, and so what I've picked up so far that I think is reasonably interesting here is that when Peter Thiel was granted citizenship under those exceptional circumstances, he had only visited New Zealand 4 times at that stage by 2011. I think his first visit here was in 1997. And now what's also quite interesting is the Department of Internal Affairs has withheld the actual number of days that he's spent in the country. They've refused that, they've blanked that out in the documents. And normally a citizen...
Wait a sec, so that would seem a material detail given that we were told that he had strong connections with New Zealand. That's been redacted, has it?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, he's only visited 4 times and they won't say how many days he's spent in the country. Now, typically, to be granted citizenship, you'd have to spend 1,350 days in the country over the previous 5 years. And we already knew that Mr. Thiel didn't meet those criteria. So it may be quite a low number there. Now, what is also apparent is the Department of Internal Affairs did recommend, as the Minister at the time, Nathan Guy, has said, that he grant citizenship. They said... Mr. Thiel, under the exceptional circumstances, he'd made numerous investments in New Zealand companies, and they also talked at length about the contacts that he could provide for New Zealand companies up in Silicon Valley in the US. They thought, that was highly valuable as well.
Okay. I see from the notes that you've sent up to us, Benedict, very quickly that he had support from some prominent businessmen. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So far I've seen Rod Drury, in charge of the accounting firm Xero, and also the Trade Me founder, Sam Morgan, both wrote in support of Peter Thiel's citizenship bid.
Okay, thanks, Benedict. This is unfolding, and I presume you'll be filing for Morning Report on this?
Indeed.
Okay, Benedict, and if you find anything else that is of great interest, we'll talk to you before 6:30. Thanks, Benedict. Benedict Collins, live from the gallery. It's 6:30 to 6. You are with Checkpoint. If you're wondering why we're covering this in a kind of make it up as we go along fashion in terms of what Benedict's able to tell us, it's simply that Internal Affairs only released those documents. There's over 100 pages of them. not very long ago. Right, let's go to Southland, where angry ratepayers have called on the District Council to stop bleeding them dry on an unfinished cycle trail. It follows a damning report by Deloitte slamming the council for mismanaging and poorly budgeting the project, whose costs have spiralled out to nearly $10 million. Lydia Anderson reports from today's meeting in Invercargill.
Southland District councillors were greeted by a packed public gallery for their first full meeting of 2017. Most of the audience had come to protest at the budget blower on the Around the Mountains cycle trail, which began as a government-funded project. Farmer Doug Fraser told the council in no uncertain terms to stop ratepayer funding of the trail.
This is certainly not a ratepayer responsibility. You have a damning report from Deloitte strongly critical of the governance, risk management and financial management of this project to date. We, the ratepayers, are not prepared to underwrite this project any further. It's time to stop the bleeding. Thank you.
Mr Fraser says the group is concerned the council might divert money from rural roading and natural emergencies to the cycleway. Already $9.8 million has been spent on the project, almost $6 million over the initial budget. Brian McCandless warned the council the total cost of the cycle trail over a 30-year lifespan could swell to more than $20 million.
The easy option for all of you would be to continue to throw good money after bad in the vain hope of a positive outcome from this project. Every textbook I have ever read on project management cautions against this.
Southland ratepayers aren't the only ones seeing red over the project. The council is locked in an environment court battle with the lobby group Fish and Game over a proposed section of the track which would traverse a world-famous trout fishing area on the Oriti River. Southland manager Zane Moss says it would be more simple and cheaper for the council to divert the track through the Makaroa Valley, which runs parallel to the Oriti.
Well, Fish and Game has maintained throughout this process that the Maraoa, which is a parallel valley to the Upper Oriti, provides a really good alternative route. It's as scenic, arguably more scenic. It's slightly longer, but it has the benefit from our perspective of not ruining a world-class fishery.
Southland Mayor Gary Tong says he still believes in the cycle trail and has even bought a bike to ride it, but acknowledges the council needs to discuss whether or not to continue with the project. He says while the projected $20 million cost by the ratepayers group sounds high, if the council faces further opposition and legal fees, the cost of the project could rise. The Mayor says it's possible the council bit off more than it could chew when it took on the project.
Yeah, we're all putting our hands up and saying that this is totally outside of core services. When I was standing to be elected, for mayor, I made that point a couple of times. This project's probably a little bit big. Obviously got in the chair, now need to tidy it up. Somebody said to me just recently, you've been handed a lemon, let's try and make some lemonade out of it. I thought, yeah, well, we're trying to make that lemonade out of it.
The council is awaiting the outcome of an Environment Court decision in Marlborough before deciding whether it will continue with its appeal against Fish and Game. A decision on the future of the cycle trail is expected to be made in the next 2 months. In Invercargill for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
Let's go to the story of a German tourist lost on Mount Taranaki for 3 days who survived on a packet of Skittles and a bottle of water. Theresa Schaaf of Darmstadt was found a little after 11 o'clock this morning by a dock worker who was out counting blue ducks. Taranaki reporter Robin Martin asked her how she found shelter at night.
I built a little shelter out of sticks and fern, and I put tissues around my shelter so people could see them. It was pretty cold.
And how did you get discovered? Who found you?
I was more or less forcing my way through a track that wasn't really prepared for walking, and eventually I was yelling for help like every 100 meters, and somebody answered. It was a nice feeling because I hadn't hurt anyone in 3 days.
Were you worried about your safety by that stage?
I was very careful when moving because injuring myself would have meant the end. Basically, I would have needed to wait for somebody to get me.
Have you learned anything from this experience?
I've learned lots of things. You should charge your phone when you go into the forest. You should bring more water than you need, as well as food. You should be prepared for anything.
There was Robin Martin talking to a young German tourist who sounded in remarkably good nick after spending more time than she'd bargained for on Mount Taranaki. Coming up to 6 o'clock. No wonder those Southlanders are angry, says Max. Incompetence. The Deloitte's report identified tens of millions of dollars of wasted money on a poorly conceived and unwanted cycleway, which would predominantly cater for Queenstown-based tourists. Who's accountable? Staff, councillors, both? Yes, we'll keep looking at that. We want to repeat the Department of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Internal Affairs has released over 100 pages on Peter Thiel and the discretionary granting of citizenship to him. And one of the early details to emerge is that he, prior to being granted the citizenship, only visited New Zealand 4 times. How many nights or days for in total? Well, we don't know because the ministry has redacted that. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. You're on RNZ.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. I'm Paul Brennan. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says he would prefer to continue working with his current support partners after the September election, but is not ruling out a deal with New Zealand First. Mr English announced this afternoon the general election will be held on Saturday, September 23rd. Bill English says it's unlikely National would work with New Zealand First in a future government, but not out of the question.
We're a party who believes in an open New Zealand, outward-looking, open to investment, immigration, and New Zealand First are an inward-looking party who believe in a closed-up New Zealand. So there's big differences. But as I've said, depending on the makeup of Parliament, we may be in the position where we would be negotiating with New Zealand First.
Bill English. In response, the Labour Party leader Andrew Little says his party is ready to change the government and build a better New Zealand. Andrew Little says the National Party has run out of ideas and his party is raring to go. He says there are major challenges with the lowest level of home ownership in 60 years and schools and the police being let down. The American billionaire Peter Thiel had only visited New Zealand 4 times when he was granted citizenship by the government in 2011. The Department of Internal Affairs is refusing to say how many days the entrepreneur and Donald Trump supporter had actually spent in the country when he was granted citizenship. Documents released by the department this evening show Internal Affairs recommended Mr Thiel should be granted citizenship under exceptional circumstances because of the numerous investments he had made in New Zealand companies and contacts he had in the United States. The documents also show Xero businessman Rod Drury and Trade Me founder Sam Morgan wrote in support of the citizenship bid. The father of a 6-year-old who was tested at a school dental clinic at the centre of a health scare is furious. Families were not alerted sooner. About 2,500 children are being tested for HIV and hepatitis after they were treated with contaminated equipment at Pukekohe Intermediate Dental Clinic between September 13th and January 23rd. Hundreds of parents have been taking their children to clinics for testing today after it was revealed last night that a hose used to suck out saliva and blood from children's mouths was connected to one that blows in air. Stuart Johnston says he's angry he wasn't personally contacted about the contamination scare instead of seeing it on social media.
It's not hard to get a group of people together to start ringing some of these parents and actually just talk to us. Let us know what's going on. Give us the correct information.
Stuart Johnston. The DHB says it had planned to open the hotline, open clinics, start calling parents and make a statement to the media at 9 this morning, but it was forced to go public last night because it was leaked to the media. In a staged prime-time televised event, President Donald Trump has announced conservative-leaning Judge Neil Gorsuch as his nominee for the US Supreme Court. If confirmed by the Senate, the 49-year-old Colorado native will succeed Justice Antonin Scalia, whose death last year created the vacancy on the 9-member court. From Washington, here's the BBC's David Willis.
Justice Scalia's death left a year-long vacancy on the Supreme Court, one the Republican majority in the Senate refused to fill. They insisted instead that the seat be filled after the presidential election, and they will no doubt be delighted with the choice of Judge Neil Gorsuch, a mainstream conservative whose ideology is said to be closely aligned to that of the man he's been nominated to replace. And his confirmation by the Senate could tip the balance of the 9-member panel on issues such as abortion, voting rights and religious equality.
David Willis reporting there. The White House has backtracked on a promise to honour a refugee deal with Australia, saying Donald Trump is still considering it. The clarification came soon after the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the deal was going ahead, provided the refugees went through extreme vetting. He said the deal would include about 1,250 refugees. In a follow-up phone call to the ABC, a White House source said if the president did honour the deal, it would only be because of America's long-standing relationship with Australia. Many are from countries covered by Mr. Trump's executive order curbing immigration to the United States from 7 Muslim countries. The fire service is appealing to Northland people to be extra careful about where they throw their cigarette butts after a grass fire near Marsden Point. It took 9 fire crews and a helicopter to put out the fire on peatland on Marsden Point Road this afternoon. A rural fire manager, Trevor Bullock, says the fire burned over 2 hectares and had the potential to be very dangerous.
There were structures that could have been involved. There's Marsden Point refinery, there's gas pipelines. It had serious potential, and being grass and gorse, it could have escalated.
Trevor Bullock says the cause of the fire isn't confirmed, but the whole area is bone dry and a carelessly thrown cigarette butt could have easily ignited it. Fire crews will monitor the site overnight to be sure underlying peat soils are not smouldering. It's 4.5 minutes past 6. On to sport now. The Warriors playmaker Shaun Johnson will tone down his participation in this weekend's Auckland Nines competition in the hope of securing a more important prize, the National Rugby League title. Johnson has been an ever-present fixture in the Nines tournament since it started in 2014, guiding the Warriors to last year's final. But he says he'll be taking more of a backseat role this weekend as he focuses on pushing his side's NRL success.
Had a few chats with the coaching staff, and definitely my minutes are going to be reduced this time round. I probably haven't helped that in the past, to be fair. I'm so competitive, I want to be out there all the time, and had a good crack at it last year, but obviously took a knock which sort of had a bit of an effect on how my season went. So I want to have a good season, good NRL season. It's a long year, so definitely minutes are going to be restricted.
Shaun Johnson. The Australia captain Matthew Wade has been ruled out of the remainder of the one-day series against New Zealand and will return home to Melbourne for treatment on a back injury. The wicket-keeper, who was leading Australia for the series in the absence of regular skipper Steve Smith, missed the 6-run defeat in the first game in Auckland on Monday. Aaron Finch will again captain the side in tomorrow's match in Napier. New Zealand lead the 3-match series 1-0. And the French football club Lille has offered free entry to women after sexist banners appeared in the home crowd at a recent match. One sign depicted a woman above the word kitchen and another showed a man alongside the word stadium. That's the news.
Greg O'Connor takes on politics.
I'm going to this thing with the intention of winning, but I'd be silly not to. First thing to win is a nomination.
Council's take on Nick Smith.
What we're talking about is growing genetically modified crops. There's a lot of fantastic things that are happening in medicine, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about land use.
And taking on a dental crisis.
We are aiming to have seen all of the children within about the next 3 weeks, and we're aiming to have contacted them all within the next 7 days.
Clearing the air. Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espin, a morning report weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, nose jobs for kids, the campaign against plastic surgery apps aimed at children, and after 10, Sherlock Holmes Handbook for the Digital Age with cybersecurity expert Alan Pearce. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
MedService short forecast now. This takes us through to midnight tomorrow, Thursday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. Fine and cloudy, light rain from Auckland southwards tomorrow evening. Waitomo through to Wellington. That includes the central high country and for Waitarapa as well. Occasional rain developing. Rain becoming persistent and heavy tomorrow. Northwesterly gales about Wellington and Waitarapa for the rest of today and in many other places tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain develops in Hawke's Bay before the end of today and Gisborne in Gisborne late tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, scattered rain clearing this evening but returning tomorrow afternoon. Canterbury, drizzle patches clearing this evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Westland, fine or becoming fine before the end of today, but rain returns tomorrow evening. For Otago and Southland, fine about central Otago, but showers elsewhere at times. Possible thunderstorms about eastern Otago for the rest of today. Fiordland, showers today, rain tomorrow afternoon and evening, thunderstorms as well. And for the Chatham Islands, a period of rain tonight and again tomorrow evening. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Paul. You're with Checkpoint. We're going to go back to our political reporter, Benedict Collins, who was going through these documents released by the Department of Internal Affairs probably about an hour ago now about the discretionary granting of citizenship to billionaire Peter Thiel. Benedict, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Benedict. Nice to talk to you again. So when we last spoke, you told us that Peter Thiel was granted citizenship after having only visited New Zealand 4 times for an unknown number of days because the documents had that information redacted, right?
That's correct, yep. So Department of Internal Affairs, they haven't withheld much, but they've definitely blocked out the number of days that Peter Thiel has actually spent in New Zealand.
Right, so what we can guess is that he hadn't lived here or done anything approximating that.
That's right. It's clear he came well short of meeting any normal sort of residence requirements that permanent residents would normally have to meet in order to become a citizen. He's obviously falling well short, and I guess it could be, embarrassing for the government just how many days he has spent on. That may well be why they've withheld this information.
Yeah. We've just received an email from a man called Albert who says, I've lived and worked in New Zealand for 30 years, been a resident since May 1989, but I wasn't granted citizenship because I left the country for family reasons for more than 6 months in 2013. So the Peter Thiel thing is seriously discretionary. What else are you being... So what justification is given for it?
Yeah, so they say Peter Thiel's philanthropy, he's donated to a lot of causes in New Zealand. I think after the big earthquake in Christchurch, he donated money there to help. He's also had involvement with numerous New Zealand businesses, been a significant investor in companies like Xero and other businesses. And that's really what the Department of Internal Affairs sort of hones in on when it recommended to the Minister at the time, Nathan Guy, that he grant citizenship, even though make it at the same time very clear the guy just hasn't spent much time in New Zealand.
Thanks, Benedict. We really appreciate this, and we will hear more from you on Morning Report, filing for that in the morning. Let's move on to the other political story of the day here in New Zealand, I guess, well, one of a number, and that is Bill English naming the election date, September 23rd, as you will have heard in the news. He took the opportunity to have a bit of a swipe at the Greens. Despite National's head start in the opinion polls, Bill English says he will be taking nothing for granted because under MMP elections are always close.
My preference, again, will be to continue working with our current partners, ACT, United Future and the Māori Party. Together, this group of parties have provided stable and successful government, which matters more now at a time of uncertainty in many parts of the world. Today I'm ruling out working with the Labour Greens grouping. They are increasingly far left, inward looking, and as we saw in their State of the Nation speech, have no policies or ideas and don't back New Zealanders to succeed. New Zealand First is an unlikely partner. However, I would be prepared to have discussions with them post-election, depending on the makeup of Parliament.
Our political editor, Jane Patterson, says, well, as we all knew, I think September 23rd wasn't really much of a surprise.
Now, before he resigned as Prime Minister at the end of last year, John Key dropped very hints about a September 23rd election. That's the timetable that everyone had really been expecting. It doesn't really advantage parties to go too early into an early election. They do tend to get punished unless they have a very good reason. So Bill English sticking to that timetable.
What did he say about possible coalitions? Because this is obviously important every election year, but it seems that there's a real early concentration on what Winston Peters is going to do, who Bill English can work with, and so on.
Again, this is really following the election year script of John Key. He would also, about this time, outline who he would like to work with. Bill English saying in his post-cabinet briefing today, or his briefing in the at Parliament, that he would like to work with United Future, with ACT and the Māori Party, of course, National Party's current partners. But he also did say that while they would be an unlikely partner, he would also consider post-election negotiations with Winston Peters, but certainly not putting that out there as a favourite. They really want to stick to the parties that they know and work with at the moment.
Yeah, although there's not a huge number to be gained from working with Peter Dunn and David Seymour, is there? They bring one each. with them unless something remarkable happens. And the Māori Party, once again, a small caucus there. One of the parties he worked at, that we absolutely know he's not going to work with, is the Greens. He was having a bit of a go, Jane.
He was, and just coming back to your point about not many parties, that's why he and John Key before him have left the door open to Winston Peters. They can't afford to rule Mr Peters out in New Zealand First at this stage of the game. They're very aware of those 4 seats that are held by their confidence and supply partners. But yes, coming back to the Greens, a tried and true election tactic, slap into the Greens, and he's tagging on Labour as well. The Memorandum of Understanding actually gives National a bit of a target for Labour and the Greens to label them as far left, Labour being dragged to the left. Him talking today about how pretty much the only party in Parliament they really wouldn't work with would be the Greens, coming quickly on behind would be Labour. But it really sounded like electioneering. It sounded like a stump speech today, so laying out the stable government, the building the New Zealand economy, jobs and that sort of thing, and then having a crack at the opposition. So we're feeling like election year already.
Yes, it does feel that way, doesn't it? Jane Patterson, our political editor. Let's go to America now and more politics. Donald Trump has restored the Supreme Court's Conservative majority by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch to a lifetime position. Protests against Mr Trump's choice were made outside the Supreme Court following the announcement. So far, overwhelmingly, the protests against Donald Trump have been from Democrat voters and at more senior levels from Democrat appointments. But writing for the Huffington Post, Robert Kuttner, co-founder and co-editor of the American Prospect magazine and a man whose work has appeared everywhere from the New York Times to Atlantic to the New Yorker, says Republican supporters are already showing signs of deserting him. Really? Yes, says Bob Kuttner, because, quote, it's so horribly clear that Trump is unfit for office. And when Republicans turn against him, impeachment becomes a possibility because, again, I quote, it's the only way to get him out. Really? Or is this just wishful thinking?
Seems to me that maybe you've got half of the Republicans in Congress who are just willing to go with him because they view him as their instrument. And you've got the other half who are really becoming alarmed for their country, and they're becoming alarmed for what this is going to do to the Republican Party. His approval ratings are now down in the 30s. And even though he can pretend that, these are just made up poll numbers, normal Republicans are going to pay attention to that. And then I think the other thing that's happening is you've got serious people who are building a dossier of all of the impeachable offenses that he's committed. So I think this is going to gather some momentum. This is not Turkey. This is not Hungary. The United States still has some checks, some constitutional checks.
And also, it seems to me what you're saying is one of the biggest checks might in fact not be that meritorious, but that is Republican congressmen, senators looking at self-preservation. In other words, if Trump is going to be a disaster, they want to recuse themselves from the impact of that.
Yes, quite. And
Okay.
I also think that you've got you also have someone like John McCain, who's, I think, 79 years old. He's in his last term. He actually cares about his country. He is alarmed. He's horrified at some of the things that Trump is doing. And you do have a few Republicans in that category as well.
Yeah, you cited the example of Mitch McConnell, who was rejecting Trump's view on Putin. What about Trump's constituency, Trump's electorate? Because the more people like you and I have this conversation, in some perverse kind of way, the more they feel he is their man, that he is outside the establishment, that he is annoying precisely the people that they hoped he would annoy.
Yeah, but I honestly think that's maybe 25 to 30% of the electorate. Because if you look at who voted for Trump, you had maybe half his vote were hardcore, far-right economic nationalists, maybe even neo-fascists. But a lot of people who voted for Trump were people who just could not abide Hillary Clinton, or who felt that they'd been losing out economically and they might as well take a chance on this guy. But I think when push comes to shove, I think half of the people who voted for Trump are starting to get alarmed by some of the things that he's doing. That's why his approval ratings are down in the 30s.
Can we talk then literally about the mechanism of impeachment? If it happens, how would it happen and who would lose it? I mean, there's no Ken Starr. We all remember his extraordinary, bizarre, singular pursuit of Bill Clinton. Is there an equivalent? Who would lead it and how?
Well, I think what will probably happen, and I've been in some conversations about this, you've got very serious people now collecting dossiers on things that he's doing that are impeachable. I think you're going to see a blue ribbon citizens committee of some kind that's bipartisan that will build this dossier and forward it to the House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary, which is where an impeachment usually begins. And then when this thing ripens politically, when some Republicans are ready to cross the aisle because this man is such a menace to everything, then you would open a formal inquiry. They could set up a select committee on impeachment. They could do it through the House Judiciary Committee, and that will take months, I think, rather than years. But I think it's going to happen because he is such a psychopath. And that has not escaped the attention of serious Republicans.
Of course, serious Republicans will also be watching the salutary lesson, for example, of Sally Yates getting the boot. And the people who go first on this, if they go too early, are going to be punished by Trump in ways that will leave them and everyone who might be tempted to back them reeling, surely.
Well, except that the American Constitution does have this device known as separation of powers. And Trump can't do anything to particular members of Congress or to particular senators. I mean, he can try to play games and deny their states some benefits. But what is he going to do to John McCain? There's really nothing he can do to John McCain. And I think there are Republican members of the House in the same situation who, there was a book that John Kennedy wrote called Profiles in Courage, and we will either see some profiles in courage or I really fear for my country.
It's Robert Koutner, who has written for the Huffington Post about how impeachment might happen. And yes, we aren't even a fortnight into the Trump presidency and people are already discussing that. It's 6:21. Let's go to Kaikoura. November's earthquake will cast a long shadow over schools in the town this year. It's forced one small school to close, and the 5 remaining in and around the town are expecting behavioural problems to emerge among some of their students. But it's not all bad. Kaikoura's children are likely to learn a lot about earthquakes and disaster recovery this year. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen has filed this report.
November's earthquake caused little physical damage to the 6 schools in and around Kaikoura, but the disruption it caused to the community has been the death knell for one of them, Linton Downs School. The principal, Sarah Logerson, says the 100-year-old country school no longer has enough students.
We lost one family due to the earthquake. Their house was red zone, so it was completely destroyed. So they've moved down closer to a family down towards Waikuku there. So that was a bit of a shame. And then we would have had 2 students. And then we consulted the community and found that there wasn't many more children coming through on the roll and stuff. So we've had to make the decision to actually close the school.
Sarah Logerson says the primary school was expected to close eventually, but the earthquake hastened its demise. Meanwhile, in Kaikoura itself, the principal of St Joseph's School, Mary Gray, says the earthquake is likely to have a delayed impact on children's behaviour.
The children superficially are very excited to be back because they want to be with their peers and their friends and catch up. I would imagine that down the track we might see some anxiety or some behaviours that, show that children are a little afraid. But we'll have things in place to make sure that we can manage that for them.
But the school won't be trying to keep the quake out of the classroom. In fact, Mary Gray says it will form the focus of this year's learning.
Our theme for the year, our inquiry, is Operation Rebuild, and we'll be looking at, rebuilding confidence and resilience. And obviously in our science, we've earmarked ecology and geology and the change to the environment so that the children have the background and the understanding of why earthquakes happen and how they happen.
The quake disrupted NCEA exams for Kaikoura High School students last year, but the principal, John Tate, says it's still got 100% pass rates at levels 2 and 3 and 95% at level 1.
Just on
people attaining, it's been very good. But we feel it probably has affected the number of endorsements, merit and excellence endorsements, because they're a little bit down from last year. So some impact, but not huge.
But John Tate is wary about the ongoing emotional impact of the quake.
We're going to have to be pretty sensitive and have our antennae out, I think, over the year just to see how students are going. And for that matter, some of our staff have lost their homes. So it's going to be a year of looking out for each other.
Principals say that getting students back to school and back to a routine will be an important step in Kaikoura's recovery. The Education Ministry has provided the town schools with extra support, including staffing and funding guarantees and access to a mental health support team. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
It's 6:24. The race in the Ohario electorate has just got more interesting, with the man who's been the face of the Police Association for 20 years, Greg O'Connor, throwing his hat into the ring. It's a key strategic seat for the government, currently held by one of National Support Party's United Future leader Peter Dunn. Our political reporter May Heron has been out in the electorate.
Peter Dunn has held the seat in Wellington's northwest since 1984, but his winning margins have slimmed down over time. He only won by 700 votes in the last election. But 90-year-old Gordon Smith, who has lived in this area for decades, still has confidence in the man he voted for. Greg O'Connor, he's going to try and stand in this seat.
Yeah, well, he's wasting his time.
Is he?
I hope.
However, 87-year-old Margaret has a different opinion. Peter Dunn has obviously been in this electorate for a long time. Too long, do you think?
Oh yes, I think you need change. I think change brings variety, brings interest. I think it's a good idea.
On the streets of Johnsonville, around half of the people talked to knew who Greg O'Connor was, though most couldn't say whether they thought he'd be good for the electorate.
No, even though I read it in the paper, I still don't know who he is. Trade union, maybe? No, I don't remember.
Do you know who Greg is?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
What do you think about him?
I think he did a good job when he was working with the police. Yeah.
Do you think he'll make a good electorate leader here for
I
you
have
guys?
no idea.
Do you know who Greg O'Connor is?
No, I don't ring a bell, I'm afraid.
This morning, Greg O'Connor announced that he was going to run in this
Yeah.
electorate. Do you know who he is?
Oh yes, couldn't miss. I've been 87. I've heard him on the radio so often.
Do you know who that guy is?
No.
Do you know who Peter Dunn is?
Yes, I do.
How well do you think Peter Dunn has done for this electorate?
I think he's done really well for the electorate. I was really disappointed when he jumped ship from Labour, but I have to admit that he's very good for the electorate. He always fronts up to any local activities. He gives a lot of his time and energy to the district. Now, who is the other?
So he was the former police union guy, and he is with Labour. Obviously, being a Labour supporter, do you think that will sway your mind at all to vote for him?
Yes.
The Ohario seat is a lifeline for Peter Dunn, whose party has not reached the 5% threshold in the last 4 elections. But Mr Dunn isn't fazed by his potential new rival.
You know, he's picked the electorate like some people pick darts on a dartboard. This is where he might like to stand. He doesn't live there. He's got no real connection to the place, but good on for having a go. The last time we regularly had Labour candidates who lived in the place and actually were part of it was when I was the Labour MP, and that's over 20 years ago.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, was surprised by Labour's support of Greg O'Connor.
Well, it's not consistent with fresh, bright faces for the future, that's for sure.
Greg O'Connor has a lot of family ties with the Labour Party and says it was a natural fit for him given his strong sense of social justice.
With the world the way it is, politics all of a sudden has taken a whole step forward. Trump, whatever else he is a big disruptor, and we're going to need some stability in the world. And I just want to be part of a party that really focuses on getting people into houses, keeping them safe and getting them jobs.
But even if Mr O'Connor doesn't win the seat, the Labour leader Andrew Little has signalled he could have a high placing on the party list.
I'm very keen to have him on my team regardless. I think he'll be an excellent contributor to a Labour caucus after the general election.
The Green Party has not yet announced who it will stand in the seat. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Ko Heron Tēnei.
Thanks, Mo. That's Ohario in Wellington. Of course, also today, Gareth Morgan's Opportunities Party announced it will contest the Mount Albert by-election. Their Chief of Staff, Jeff Simmons, is going to contest the seat. Right. Earlier in the program, Giles Beckford, who was doing business news, also showed us the bug slider that Te Papa is selling at the moment as part of their bug exhibition. Giles would need it because, well, frankly, it had been sitting around for a couple of hours. But as he was leaving his cross with us, he went into the newsroom, and the slider, made up of chicken, meat and locusts, attracted the attention of our sports editor, Stephen Hewson. We all know what sports reporters are like. And here's what happened next.
Yeah, you don't want to dip in the aioli?
In the aioli?
The ant-aioli?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give it a crack first without the aioli.
All right, that's fine.
So,
It's not too bad.
well, anything fried, it's fine. It is a bit bland though.
Ah. Right.
It does need a bit of that.
So that's minced chicken and chopped up locust.
Oh, there's chicken with it?
Yeah.
Is that a good mix? It's like mixing species.
Well, it's better with the aioli.
Better with the aioli.
Yeah, because it was crispy. It's just
Did you get certain lemongrass taste out of the aioli? I thought there was a touch too much vinegar.
It's mayonnaise, just mayonnaise.
Yeah, but
I didn't get strong. Just mayonnaise.
And as for Jeremy,
you could polyurethane him and keep him at top of your
actually, he could become the business mascot.
Stephen Hewson. Brilliantly ending our program for tonight. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5. Just before we go, there's a remarkable business in insects, making insects for restaurants, the culinary market. So we'll look at that tomorrow. But that's Checkpoint. Thank you for your company. See you tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News at 6:30. I'm Paul Brennan. Official documents show the American billionaire Peter Thiel visited New Zealand only 4 times before the government granted him citizenship in 2011. The Prime Minister says the general election will be held on September the 23rd. Bill English has not ruled out a deal with New Zealand First after the election. Hundreds of parents have taken their children for tests today following a contamination scare at Pukekohe Intermediate's dental clinic. And a rise in unemployment is expected to be brief, with analysts picking robust job growth this year. Our next news will be at 7.
This week on Inside Out with me, Nick Tipping, we're celebrating the 90th birthday of the legendary Ronnie Scott, whose jazz club in London became